Thank you. So yes, because we're grant funded and performance-based, record keeping is a really important part of what we do. Most of the people on this call, not all, but most of the people here are not responsible for having to complete that intake paperwork or even doing assessments, which are kind of at the heart of our record keeping responsibilities. But every classroom teacher is responsible for some very important pieces of information that for which we're accountable. So we're going to talk about those today. So kind of three main categories of record keeping that I want to cover today. And if this is review for you, fine. We all can use review on this. Sometimes I need help with some of these things. It's just part of what we do, right? So sometimes we overlook them. So it doesn't hurt to have that review and repetition, just like your students do, right? So one of them is attendance, and that's dealing with student records, right? The other two are related to staff records, which you might be surprised to learn are just as important as student records in what we do. So we're going to start out though with student attendance. And we've already talked about a lot of the reasons that accurate student attendance records are really important in our program, right? The number of attendance hours each student gets determines whether they're considered a fundable participant in our program. So in order to be a fundable participant, to move from what we call a reportable, which is just somebody who came in and said, I think I might want to do classes, and we did an intake form for them. In order to move into that participant realm, students have to have a valid assessment and at least 12 hours of attendance in our program. And those hours can include the time that they spend doing that intake appointment, the time they spend doing any assessments, their classroom time in class, getting instruction from you directly, and also any teacher conferences or contacts. So if you have a student stay 15 minutes extra to just have a conversation with them about something that they had a question on or they wanted extra help, that's time that counts towards their attendance. Time spent communicating with students over Zoom, on the phone, through texts, through emails. All of those out of class communications can be logged in the coaching hours line for each student on the attendance sheets. And I'm actually going to I'm going to open up June's just because that's the last one that really has data in it. So you can see on your attendance sheet, there's class hours, and that's where all of you log your class time, right? Any attendance hours that your students spend in classes with you. But then there's also a line that says coach hours, and that's to kind of designate, because we've made the case to the state in the past that we spend time outside of those normal classroom hours with students as well. So those communication times can be called coaching. It's not wrong to put them in the regular class hours either. I mean, if you stay on longer with a student in class and it's just part of their Zoom time from that night, you don't have to split it out and put it on the second line. It all goes into the data management system in one lump sum when I put it in. So I don't differentiate between coaching hours and classroom hours there, but we do keep track of it separately on the timesheet. So if you want to log it in one lump, that's okay. It's not going to ever be wrong. Nobody's going to question that. But if it's easier for you to keep track of, this is the time they spent in class, and then I spent, 15, 20 minutes emailing with them about something, or we had a text exchange that was pretty lengthy and should probably count for some time. They came in and visited with you if you're in a physical office, or you had a separate Zoom meeting set up for them to discuss an issue with you or to ask you some questions. All of that can go under coaching time, but it all counts.
And one of the main reasons I think we put that line there is because, so say the student is in Steven's class and, but he comes in and sees me and does an assessment and we talk about his schedule or whatever for an hour or 30 minutes. I need a place to document that. So I'll just go into Steven's class and put it in the coaching hours. So if you see hours in the coaching line that you didn't put there, don't delete them. Some other teacher spent time with that student, because I've had part-time teachers that didn't understand call me and say, well, so-and-so wasn't in class. Why did somebody put hours there? It's like, well, I put them in the coaching because he came in to see me to change his class schedule, So yeah, don't just assume you made a mistake. Some other teacher probably put that there.
Yep, and that's a good point, Debbie. Thank you. The other thing that happens a lot of times is that some teachers, certain teachers are way more likely to do this than others. Will go in and you can actually, I'm not sure if you know this or not, you can click on any of those cells and up here where it says insert comment, you can click there and you can make a comment about what happened there. And there are a lot of teachers who will do that if somebody came in and, needed help registering for a GED account. Or, they'll put in their setup GED account and they'll put in half an hour. Or they'll make a note that, this person was doing an assessment, came in for a post test, came in to go over study plan, those kinds of things. So you might see, and if you do a comment, you can type whatever you want to there, you hit comment, and then it shows up with a little flag in the corner of that box. And if you hover over it, you can see who made that comment and what it says. So, it's sometimes helpful information. It's sometimes not anything that you need to know. But you can see that in there. And why is it not letting me delete that note now? Oh, is it because I didn't click out of the cell? There we go. So, and I always try and remember to clear them out when I create the new month's attendance sheets. If I ever miss one, just holler at me and I can get rid of it too. But yeah, you might see those comments, especially on the coaching line, but sometimes on the other line as well. People will make notes there. Sometimes if students are absent, they'll make a note about why they're absent if they know, those kinds of things. So.
Where was that tab that you hit
Oh,
to do
did
that?
I hit to do the comment? It's just, you can click in any cell and then up here on your little ribbon, you can see there's one that looks like a little chat box with a plus in it and it says insert comment.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Yep. So yeah, that's one reason we need those hours logged so that they hit that 12-hour mark and actually become a fundable participant for us. Once that happens, then again, we talked about this yesterday, we need to turn our attention to progress and performance. And so that begins with quality instruction, which you're all focused on in your classes. That's where we want your main focus to be, right? To show that progress, we're required to complete that initial pre-testing to get that baseline level. And then after a certain number of hours of instruction, we should post-test that student to determine their growth. And we talked about those testing guidelines yesterday. Again, you don't have to keep track of when a student is ready for a post-test. I'll let you know that. But when that happens, we've got to, in order for that to happen, we've got to have those hours tabulated correctly. So keeping track of when students are in class, how many hours they spend, and then also the hours for those additional activities that they might do with us, all counts in order to capture the number of hours we need to get those post assessments done in a timely manner. Okay. The other thing the attendance sheets let us do is gather information that's really vital to Kim and I when we're making administrative decisions about the program. We try to keep an eye on class sizes. Some of you might not believe that after last year, but we really try to keep an eye on class sizes. Sometimes they're out of our control. We do whatever we can. And not just how many students have enrolled in class, but also how many are attending on a daily basis, because we want to maintain a reasonable student-teacher ratio as much as we can. And having a clear picture of average daily attendance helps us to do that. So I'm going to scroll down here. You might have noticed the numbers at the bottom of each attendance sheet. I know Comfort has noticed them because she is the best person at telling me when my formulas get broken and they're messed up. And she'll say, my number's not right at the bottom. And I appreciate that because I don't always, I try and check them again whenever I create the sheets, but sometimes when we're adding and taking people away, when we're moving people around, those formulas will get messed up. But you can see at the bottom of the first column, I've got a count formula in there, and that just means it's counting every place there's a value in that cell. So every place there's a date for that person who's entered on your attendance sheet, it's going to count. And right now, at the end of June, in the high beginner evening class, there were 15 people on the attendance sheet. Those are the people who had They got moved onto that June attendance sheet because they either had attendance hours in May in that class or because they were a new student in June and they were added. So there were 15 people on that sheet, right? So that's where we get that count. Some people count it themselves and don't do like Comfort does and tell me that it's off so I can adjust the formula, and they just type the number in over the top of my formula, which is irritating to me.
Drives me nuts too. And when I notice it, I fix it for you.
I appreciate that. I haven't protected those cells because I want you all to be able to, to type underneath if you've got comments to make or people to add or anything like that. But I've been tempted to protect those cells too. We also keep track of the daily attendance down here as well. So those numbers down here, that's again a count formula that counts all of the hours that are put in for those students every day. So, on the 3rd of June, 7 of those 15 people attended class. And you can see that June attendance stayed pretty stable, 6, 7, 8 across the board. The percent then is just the number of students who attended divided by the total possible number of students. And we don't pay as much attention to that. I mean, we kind of want to know if there's a lot of people who aren't attending. June is not a great time to look at those percentages. Those percentages are typically higher in the other months. In June, we all know our attendance falls off, right? So we do keep track of that, and it's nice to have it at a glance to kind of know about how many students every day are attending each of those classes. So we've got our finger on the pulse of not just how many are enrolled, but how many are actually showing up. So an example of how we use that information is the creation of additional basic level classes during last fiscal year, right? We started out with basic 1 and basic 2, and those classes just ballooned with the number of, especially our Cuban parolees who were coming in Yankton. So many of them were just at those basic levels, and they were just getting way too big, even with aides in the classrooms to reasonably manage. And to give our students the opportunity to really fully engage in the class, right? Those basic level students especially need a lot of opportunities to practice that oral language and to be able to speak. So we ended up creating 2 additional basic level classes in the evening, which is why they ended up with kind of ridiculous names like Basic 1.5 and Basic 0.5. We've tried to rectify that and just made a bigger mess this year, but we'll see how it goes. So finally then, we use those student records to understand and address bigger program needs like student retention and persistence. I think you all know that adult students are free to come and go in our program and our classes. There's not really a formal process for leaving our classes. If there were, most of our students wouldn't go through it anyway. They would just do what they always do and stop coming, right? They vote with their feet. So each month we actually look at the data that we've gathered and we assess things like the number of hours that students accumulate in our program before they leave, right? Are they staying long enough to gain skills? Are they putting in a few hours and then deciding the program isn't for them? We look for patterns to the number of hours students get before they make measurable skills gains or before they stop out of our program. And all of that information gives us clues to the ways that we can strengthen our program to better serve our students, right? So an example of this is the number of students that we've had in the last couple of years who enrolled and completed assessment, but then never actually started classes. This happened a lot in our recent program year, and that told us that even though we'd been working on enrollment and retention for about 18 months, we still had some work that we needed to do in the way that we onboard our students, particularly those in those lowest class levels, making sure that when they leave after their initial enrollment appointment, that they understand how and when to access their classes so they know how to come to class. So we had a clue there. It was like, maybe we're not doing a good enough job at this yet. And we need some additional tools under our belts to try and do a better job of that. So Debbie actually worked very hard over the last month or so to put together a really good ESL enrollment packet. Those of you who are going to be in attendance, either in person or virtually for our September staff training, I think we're going to do, and this is hard for me, I'm actually the one who suggested it. which is shocking if you know me, but I think we're actually going to do some ESL enrollment role plays and then go through our processes for how we actually walk through an ESL enrollment and how that looks in our different offices, and talking about ways that we can make that a stronger part of our program for us and for our students. So that's an example of how that student attendance can impact some of the things we do as a program. Any questions about any of that? Or attendance sheets in general?
When is a student removed? I mean, I have a few students in my class from the very beginning that never ever showed up, and they're still on my list right now. Who makes a decision? And we don't do that. I mean, who decides that this person disappeared or whatever?
It's an excellent question, and there's a couple of answers, right? So generally, they will fall off your attendance sheet if they have not had attendance hours in the previous month. Unless you tell me for some reason, hang on to them. And that's where that comments column comes in over here. A lot of times people will say, visiting family in Puerto Rico, don't take off attendance, right? Because they'll be gone for 4 weeks at a time, sometimes when that happens. Or if they're getting hours somewhere else. So some of the students who stopped attending your class may have moved into another class. I'll generally still take them off your attendance sheet if that happens. Or they may be using Burlington English in the app to continue to gain hours. So then they're still an active student, and I usually leave them hanging on your sheet for a while just to see if they'll come back into class 2 or if they're just 100% app-based. So a couple things, Stephen. You also have some control over that. This is another thing that Comfort does that's nice for me on cleanup too. She'll send me, and not every month, but every couple usually, she'll send me a list of like, these people, I've never seen these people and they're still on my list, and then so I know that's a pretty good cue to say, okay, let's pull them off the list then, because they're really not coming in. Almost inevitably when that happens, at least one of them will show back up, which is okay, because it's not hard for me to put them back on, right? And the other thing that you can do is just, make a note in the comments, like the student hasn't been coming in, they can be taken off the list. So you can either send me an email, you can make comments directly on the sheet. Because yeah, I try and catch them, but every once in a while, there's a reason why somebody hasn't fallen off there. And if it's easier for you to get them off, you can let me know that, right?
One time I had a student who stayed on my list all year and only came to my class like twice. And it turns out his work schedule was horrible, and he was doing Burlington English so much so that he got to 60 hours by the end of the year and got a level gain for us that fiscal year. So but he needed a place to hang out on the list. So he just hung out on my class list all year, and I knew he was doing Burlington English, and that was fine with me. But like she said, if it annoys you, you can tell her to take it off.
Yep. He'll stay in on the computer, right? The computer won't change. The attendance sheet is totally separate. Like I build this separate from LACES. It's not connected in any way other than me moving things back and forth between the two. So he'll still be in the data management system, but if you want them off of your attendance sheet, they'll come off your attendance sheet. That's another reason why we have that enrolled date on the attendance sheet, so that we kind of know, when people come in new, they go on there and you won't recognize them because they haven't attended class yet. They've just been through the enrollment process. So that's a cue for me, like going into August, if somebody has a July intake date or enrolled date, they're not going to be familiar to you yet, but I'll know that they're new and I shouldn't take them off that sheet. So.
And then they just fall out of a program if they haven't been with us for 90 days.
Yep. And for sure they should come off at that 90-day mark. But I'm not going to say I never make a mistake either, which is another thing to remember about the attendance sheets. You are my checks and balances, right? So if somebody that is coming to class isn't on your attendance sheet, let me know that too. So-and-so came to class, they're not on my attendance sheet. Should they be there? Did they get lost? those kinds of things. And it's possible sometimes like they re-enroll themselves without coming into us first after they've stopped out. They've still got the link and they'll just show back up. You do have the ability to like go in and type a name back in down here. So like if I haven't gotten to them yet, and this is the other thing, this is something I'm struggling with right now. Generally my process is you all do the intake and assessment, you put them in that intake and assessment folder, you put them on the class add drop list, and that's my cue, like, all right, I need to get them into places. I don't do that every day, right? I do it whenever I have time, and usually I try and get at least a chunk of uninterrupted time that I can do that in, so it's not, piecemeal here and there. So there are times that they'll end up attending class, especially if they come in at the end of one month and they start, if their enrollment is completed that last week of the month and they start the following Monday, I might not get them in right away. So they won't go on the attendance sheet generally until I put them in LACES. So I enter them in the data management system, and then I go in and I put them on the attendance sheet. So that's my process and my check and balance for myself. They don't go on the attendance until I have all their paperwork, because some people, believe it or not, don't get all their paperwork done before they try and enroll a student. So that's my check and balance. If I'm missing any part of their paperwork, I'm not going to put them in the management system and they won't go on the attendance sheet. So, if you want to type them in down at the bottom, so you're keeping track of their attendance before I get them officially on, because these fields, the last name, first name fields are locked. I'm the only person who can put people in there for that reason, because it's my check and balances. A lot of y'all are too soft. And, people will be like, well, can I come back in? Oh, sure, you can come back in. It's okay if it's the middle of the month. It's really not okay if it's the middle of the month. You shouldn't let them come back in, right? So it used to be the attendance sheets were a free for all and it was a holy mess. I've locked it down a little bit since then. Right now, we're not entering those people into LACES because we're kind of trying to see the whites of their eyes before we actually put them officially in as students. So the attendance sheets are getting done before LACES, which means that I'm going to have some work to do starting the first week in August when people start to show up and we determine who to put in. And I'm going to have to catch back up with my attendance sheets and make sure that everybody's coming in. So you all serve as checks and balances on all these things. So if you see a student that you don't think should be in your class who's coming in, you need to let me know. If there's somebody who's coming in who's not on your attendance sheet, or vice versa, if there's somebody on your attendance sheet who you haven't seen, let me know that too. You're never going to irritate me by letting me know those things. Trust me. Other questions or comments about the attendance?
Becky, I don't want to bug you guys, but there are a few of my students, I think, that have been moved up and they're still on my list. Do you take care of that, or should I notify you of that? Or
So the list right now that you have access to isn't even close to right. So don't panic about it. Debbie and I are working on the actual July attendance list. So yes, the people who have moved up should disappear off that list. The people who are coming in new will be on there. And we're kind of working on seeing how those students should be split out, especially in those basic evening classes, which are our biggest classes. So yeah, don't panic about the list for July yet. Give us probably till the end of this week and maybe the beginning of next week, and we should have good lists to send out to you guys and share with you so you can see who to expect in your classes.
And they
Thank
still
you.
won't be right on the first day of
No,
class,
they'll never be right.
because people can enroll up until the first day of class, and Becky won't have time to get them all on there. So on the first night of class, you will have people who come who aren't on your list yet.
Yeah. I do my best to get them right before we have the first day of class every month. But yeah, sometimes there are those kind of last minute flyers who come in, and there's always a chance that you'll have people come in the first evening or day of class and they won't be on that sheet. And again, don't hesitate to send me an email and ask, and I'll just let you know, yep, they're in the folder, just haven't gotten to them yet. But if there's somebody coming in who you don't have on your attendance sheet, and when you send me that email and say this person isn't on attendance yet, if I look and I don't have paperwork for them, that's a problem, because we need to know where they got that link, and we need to know who they are, and they need to have paperwork done before they continue in class. So,
Okay, thank you. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
I have two questions before you move on from attendance, Becky.
Sure.
So should I be putting in my attendance to the nearest quarter hour, to a very long decimal point? What do you, does it matter? Do you have a preference?
I generally don't go more than 2 decimal places when I enter it into the data management system, just because it's cleaner. People round to the quarter hour, people put it in exact from Zoom. I don't have a preference either way. I put in what you put in, right?
Okay. Oh,
Um,
you said I could find the attendance on Zoom?
I can, yes, you can find the attendance on Zoom. Does everybody
So
know
I
what to
don't
do
have
that?
to like write it down,
You
like
don't
what
have
time they
to,
came and
no.
what time they left. I could look it up on Zoom.
You can look it up on Zoom. I can actually probably yank this over and show it to you here. Every Zoom account has in the menu on the left-hand side here, reports. If you click on reports, it'll think for a long time because I want it to do it on the fly. Oh, come on, Zoom, be better. Either gonna come up or it kicked me out. There we go. Under usage, you click here. Didn't have to think that long that time. And here you can set your time range, right? So this was Steven's Zoom account when he was teaching. So I'm gonna go back to June 10th. And go through June 12th. And then search. And you can see here are his 3 classes, basic evening 0.5 for that week of June 10th through June 12th. It tells you had 11 participants on Monday, 7 on Tuesday, 7 on Wednesday. In order to see the actual attendance for those students, oh, it also tells you, sorry, your class was 158 minutes. That was a long one. And then 107 and 130. And then you click on participants and it will show you who was there. 13 Cornerstones career with Steven. He was there for the whole class. And then it'll show you in the most maddening way, Antonio and iPhone and Elizabeth. What I always like to do up here is show unique users. And if you click that, it combines the people who, like maybe they were in and out a couple times. Or they logged in as something else and then changed their name and it recorded them, kind of twice in the same thing. So it shows you now, Antonio was there for a total of 93 minutes. We're gonna hope Steven knows who iPhone is that was there for 92 minutes. Anna for 91, Angela for 91, Tony for 79, and Robert for 75. Now, we put them in hours, right? So you can round to your hours. Like you can put in an hour and a half for those 93, 92, 91, 91. You can put in 1.5. For 75, it's 1.25. For 79, you can put in 1.25. Or if you want to divide 79 by 60 and see what the actual decimal points are, you can do that too, right? Doesn't matter to me. People do it both ways. Perfectly fine.
I have noticed occasionally, Becky, that if iPhone put in a name later, if I logged in as iPhone and then changed it to Debbie, it might be split separate. So then what I do when I realize, oh, iPhone was Debbie and then I changed your name to Debbie and she had 5 minutes as iPhone and 80 minutes as Debbie, then I'll say she had 85 minutes. So just try to keep track of your people who don't put a name as to what, if you change their name or who they are.
Yeah.
Because I have actually tried to do attendance for someone who was gone once, and there was like iPhone 1, 2, and 3, and I was like, I can't do this.
I've tried to go in for people too, like if I'm, I'm kind of desperate to put in hours and they haven't gotten their attendance sheets done yet. Nobody on this call is guilty of that. I will go in and try and figure it out too. And it's like, oh my word, who are these people? Number one, really, really encourage them to change their name on the screen for you so that you can see, and I know that if you see their faces and you get to know them, so you kind of, in your head, who they are, but it's very, very helpful if their reports are actually right. So then
It's-
again, you can do that on every single day. You can click on the people and this will be a different list, right? But you still got repeats. So show you need to
And
do.
you can do your best to teach them to do it themselves, because that would be best.
Yeah.
But you actually can change their name for them if you are the host. So if you think you might forget who iPhone was, or if you have 3 iPhones, change their names to help yourself out.
Yeah, definitely.
I was wondering about that 107. I've never left early. Is that the total time for the class?
That's the total time that you were logged in.
That's 107 minutes. So you were
Minutes.
there like 15 minutes or extra.
Yeah, you
Oh,
logged in
okay.
early.
Yeah,
The
I
class
was
is
just-
only 90 minutes long. Yeah.
So yeah, like
I see.
you were there. Yeah, you were there for 107 minutes. Your students were all there for about an hour and a
Oh,
half.
okay. Yeah, I just never, yeah.
Yep, yep. I know it's misleading. Very good questions. Any others before we leave student attendance?
And how often are we expected to do
Oh,
attendance?
Thank you. I was going to talk about that and then I got sidetracked a little. Again, your preference, but we need the attendance hours in every week at the end of the week. So by the end of your week, whether that's Thursday or Friday for you, we really like to have those attendance hours in on the attendance sheets.
If you have a lot of iPhones and Samsungs with no names, it might be best to just do it every night after class,
Yep.
so you don't forget
Yep.
who they are.
Yeah. All right, very good. Next, staff calendar. The staff calendar is actually a really important piece of record keeping for our organization. And one of the main reasons is that we're spread over most of the eastern half of the state. We rely on that calendar to know who's working at what time and when we can expect to be able to contact one another. And as you can imagine, scheduling for the 28 classes that we run every day can get tricky, right? And when we need substitute teachers, it gets even trickier because we're looking to see, okay, who's available at what time and are they working or not? Balancing availability with workload and available hours per week is really difficult, especially if we need multiple subs in the same week. So it's incredibly helpful to know if someone's already planning to sub for a class period, so we don't spend time contacting teachers who aren't available. Determining the best schedules for trainings like this one is also an important function of the calendar. When we want to bring people together, whether it's virtually or face-to-face, we need to be able to kind of gauge the impact of a training schedule on students and teachers, and juggling time to make room in everybody's schedule for teaching, training, meetings, outreach, follow-up, without engendering overtime can be really hard. So we try to get the most out of our budget and to respect the time of our employees too, because we don't want you to have to work more than your stated contract hours. We know you all have lives outside of Cornerstones and we want that to be true, right? And we also don't like to cancel classes for trainings and meetings unless it's absolutely necessary. So we spend a lot of time looking at everybody's calendars when setting up meetings or training sessions in an effort to cause the least disruption to both students and teachers. We also look at staff calendars when we have the opportunity to add a project or a program to our organization. And again, we want to be aware of staff workloads and availability before we commit to additional opportunities that increase the number of instructional hours that we offer. So for example, if a business comes to us and asks for a Spanish class that would be held on Monday and Wednesday mornings, we need to look at the schedules of any of our teachers who are fluent in Spanish to see if we have somebody available during the times that company wants. Are there teachers who would be available to take their morning classes if they're assigned to a morning class so that they would be free to teach a Spanish class? Would that be a good business decision for us to make, right? And would that Spanish class being added increase the workloads of the teachers involved to the point that it's unreasonable for us to expect that of them? So we think of all those things when we're looking at the calendars. And then finally, staff calendars are one of the places where your hours are recorded, which impacts your paycheck for each pay period. So it's important for the calendar to be up to date and correct. So I'm gonna pause there briefly and just pull up the calendar. I've got Huron's calendar open. I like to do this every once in a while. I'm going to take my own personals out of there. Because I do have those on there too, just to make sure I don't overschedule myself. This is fun for me, because this is one of the things that we do occasionally. So this is everybody on Huron's calendar, right? I'm going to add Aberdeen in. And there's Mitchell. There's Vermillion. And there's Yankton. So that's how busy we all are every day. It's no wonder that we're tired, right? It looks ridiculous in the week. It's not even any better in the day, right? Like usually when we're doing this, we look at it in the day kind of thing. We very seldom look at all 5 at the same time, because it is crazy making, trying to just figure out who's where and doing what, and available for anything. So like right now, if we just go across the timeline, right? Andrew's Pearson testing, Debbie's in the office. Jeremy's at lunch. There's Pearson testing happening in Huron. Jennifer's at the board meeting. Aubrey's here in training. Nikita's like right at the tail end of a block of time that she's got marked there. Susan's reviewing something. I'm doing training. Oh, Susan's in training too. She's got herself. Oh, maybe that one stops. Starlin's on vacation. Rebecca's in the office. Denise is at training. Kim's in a board meeting. Yep. So we can just kind of see where everybody's at. So yeah, the staff calendar can be a little nuts, but it doesn't have to be. Pretty much it goes like this, right? Everybody's assigned a color. If you're not sure what your color is, you might not have one yet, and you can pick an available one. So I know that everything on the calendar for me is in basil, is the color that it is. I'm green, right? I know Andrew's yellow, I know Aubrey's orange in the Huron calendar. Kim is turquoise, and Susan is whatever that color is called. I can't remember that one. So whenever you're going in to record what you're doing, if you're going to be here in the evening from 6 to 7:30, like you're teaching a class, you would go in and add yourself in. And I would say, Becky, teaching class. Or a lot of you put the name of your class, right? You'll put in Evening C, which I am not going to teach basic Evening C.
It's available if you'd
I know
like to
it's
take that
available, but
position.
I'm not teaching basic Evening C. You can change the times. You can make it repeat. You can make it repeat daily. If you do a custom repeat, you can make it repeat every week on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And you can make it go on forever. I usually do my repeating stuff half a year at a time. So I usually, if I'm going to do a repeating, I'm going to make it go until December 20th. And then if I hit done and save, you'll see me doing that every day, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, until December 20th. If I made a mistake, or if somebody else takes it over for me, or I decide, no, I don't want anybody to think I'm even teaching basic Evening C, I can delete that. And I can either delete just the single event that I'm looking at, or I can do all of them. I'm not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this, but suffice it to say, when you're teaching class, we want your classes to be on the calendar, right? If you're not going to be teaching class, you can make a note of that too, like on vacation, right? Those kinds of things are important for us to know. And then hopefully whoever's subbing for you puts on their calendar that they're subbing for you. So that we
And
can
sometimes I've noticed some teachers will say like, Pam out, Debbie subbing, or
Yep.
like, it's nice to see, even say who your sub is in case, Becky's freaking out that we forgot to cover it or something.
forgot a sub, that we didn't cover a class for some reason, which has happened. I'm just going to be honest and say that it does happen. So yeah, if you have questions about how to get that stuff on the calendar, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, me, Debbie, anybody who's worked here for a while. It gets pretty good with the calendar, and we can help you get those things set up so that they're accurately reflecting what you're doing on any given day. Questions about the calendar? Stephen, your
Does my
time, I think,
calendar have to match my timesheet exactly?
it does, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Stephen, I think you're noted on the Aberdeen calendar because that's where you're located. Alexa, you're on the Yankton calendar because that's where you're located. Comfort's on the Aberdeen calendar. Yeah, so if you're not sure where to find yourself too, you can always ask somebody. And yes, thank you, Debbie, for segueing us into timesheets, which is the very last thing I want to talk about. Completing your timesheet seems like an obvious task, right? But it can be trickier than you might think at Cornerstones. Most of you only have one category where you're putting time, right? It's usually AEL Direct in the community where you're based. But there might be times when you're asked to split your time between 2 or more projects. And if that's the case, you need to make sure you're recording your time where you're working your time. And the other thing is you want to be sure to record your hours that you're working so you get paid accurately. But we also use the staff timesheets to charge our other expenses to the grants we receive in an equitable manner. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but we work on a cost allocation system. So the number of hours spent in each category determines how much of each income category is allocated to things like rent and phone bills. If we bill most of our time in a month to the adult education grant, then the adult education grant is going to pay a higher percentage of our rent, our phone bill, our internet, supplies, those kinds of things. That's part of the invoicing process to the state. And if there's any discrepancies, the state can start withholding payments of our grant funding until they're resolved. So it's important to be mindful of where and when and how you're logging your time, right? So again, as Debbie said, our staff calendars are used as a cross-check to the timesheets. So if you say you worked for 2.5 hours on June 14th, your calendar should reflect the time you spent working and the task that you were doing. And when we're fiscally audited by the state, if the staff time on the timesheet doesn't match the staff time and activity on the calendar, that's seen as a discrepancy and it could ping us on our audit, right? So we know that you're all trustworthy and that when there's a discrepancy between those two things, it's a simple, honest mistake or oversight on your part, right? But it's possible that an outside auditor coming in who doesn't know you, doesn't know our organization, might think there's something unethical going on, okay? Multiple issues of that kind could be a reason our organization could fail to be considered for future funding. And I'm not saying this to scare anybody or to freak you out, right? But there's a reason that sometimes we can get snarky about your calendar and your timesheet not matching. So just be aware that when your timesheet says that you were working a certain number of hours, your calendar also needs to say that you were working that number of hours. I'm gonna pop open the timesheets. This is my timesheet. My timesheet and Kim's timesheets are the stupidest timesheets available, right? Because we both work in all communities in all aspects of what we do. So we've got tons and tons of choices to work from here on our timesheets. A lot of times you'll see me, I do what I call spreading, right? So like if I'm putting time into direct, which means I'm working directly on things that impact students, I'm doing it for all program sites. So we'll have hours here and there and everywhere. If I'm doing data management, which is data entry, then my hours will a lot of times be spread between the communities in that data management category. I'm going to actually flip to Stephen since he's right next door to me because his looks more like everybody's looks, right? Everybody who's on this call has fewer categories that they can log in. So Stephen, because he's based in Aberdeen, has Aberdeen AEL Direct because what Stephen does is direct work with the student population that we have. So everything that Stephen does is considered direct services to students, including what you're doing right now, which is training for you to better serve the students, right? So when Stephen goes in on his timesheet, he's going to log time that he spent yesterday and today in these webinars, I actually can't do it for him, or I would, right? If I try, I'm hitting my number one right now. I can't do
Uh,
this because I am logged in as Becky and not as
Becky-
Steven. So
Becky,
while
I
I
can't-
can,
Right.
I can see
Becky-
his timesheet, I can't enter anything into it because I don't have permission. I only have permission
Becky,
to enter things in my own timesheet.
I was gonna say, I can't do it either because I tried it yesterday and today, and it said it's a protected cell,
Oh,
and it says to contact spreadsheet administrator. But
so,
those hours, no, that's not any big deal for me. A couple of
well,
hours.
but it's important that we pay you for them. We want to pay you for them. Send an email to fiscal@cornerstonescareer.com and tell them, or to Kim, either one. I just know she's in the fiscal office working today. And tell her that you can't type in your timesheet.
And
She needs-
Stephen, did you for sure type in the right cell? Because if you tried to type where the zeros are, that is protected. And if you tried to type in you have to be in that exact box she's in, because if you're up or down, it's not going to work either.
I tried both, I think, Debbie, but I'll try again.
Try
I-
one more time before you email Kim
Yeah,
and make
I
sure
know- I
you're
know we,
lined up with the AB for sure.
We had
Um,
that problem last time, yeah, but I did the above and I did the actual box and it,
The other thing to
Okay.
make sure is like, right now, I'm logged into my cornerstonescareer.com Google account. I'm also logged into my personal Google account. So I have to have my Cornerstones Career as my active one up here, as my one on top, in order to be able to type anything into my timesheet, right? Not just your timesheet. So the other thing to check is, are you logged into the right Google account up here? And if you're logged into your Cornerstones Career Google account and you still can't type in there, then yeah, definitely let her know, because especially at the beginning of the year, it's a very complicated system because, you know, it works together with the cost allocation system and with it tracks all of our leave requests and those kinds of things too. So stuff gets broken sometimes in the transition. So if anybody has any of those things where you try and type in a cell and you can't, make sure you let Kim know. She's the one who manages those, and she will do her best to fix it for you. But yeah,
thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for
I'm always
mentioning.
causing problems.
Nope, we need to know that. It was funny when she was trying to get the July one set up. She kept coming in and saying, "Try and type in there," and I'd come and try and type, and I wouldn't be able to, and she'd be like, "Oh," and she'd go back and she'd work on it some more. So it's a difficult thing to get perfect, and she'll need to know if it's not working right for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question. The other thing to notice here is you've got your weekly hours, right? So Stephen's allocated 14 hours a week for his 2 classes. So that's class time and prep time. He's definitely not going to go over that right now when we're just doing training time, but once we get into August, he might need those whole 14 hours. And when you put that time in, it'll tell you. So, you know, like if you go, oh, and I can't do it. You can see it on mine. Right now, I've worked Monday, Tuesday. I haven't put in my hours for my half a day on Wednesday yet. I usually put in my hours every day, honestly, because I need to keep track of what I did. And if I don't do it every day, I will totally forget what I spent the day working on. So I usually try and do them at least once a day. Sometimes if I'm especially busy in different projects, I'll do them at lunchtime and then at the end of the day. But it tells me I've worked 16 hours. I have 24 hours left on my contracted hours for the week this week. Again, we try not to go over, and I think everybody's work agreement says don't go over unless you specifically have the consent of the executive director. So Kim has to approve anything that goes over our contracted hours. One of the nice things about working at Cornerstones as a full-time employee especially is we're not expected to put in time beyond our contracted hours in a week. If I hit 40 hours at the end of the day on Thursday or by noon on Friday, I go home and live my life. So that was a lot. Like I said, record keeping is not the most fun thing that we ever do, but it's a necessary part of what we do. So we're kind of right at our time, but any last questions about the record keeping process that we've just talked about? If not now, I can guarantee that there will be questions about student attendance sheets, calendars, timesheets at some time going forward in this year. So do not hesitate to ask. I have said this over and over again to many of you. There are no dumb questions here. We learn as we go. We need to practice what we preach as educators and learn from what we don't know and learn from our mistakes and ask those questions if we're not sure. So do not ever hesitate to ask me a question about any of those things, because they're confusing and they're hard. They're harder than they should be, right? So if you can't remember something we talked about, if you're not sure, if something doesn't seem right on any of those things, your timesheet, your calendar, your student attendance sheet, do not hesitate to ask, because sometimes there's mysteries. Debbie and Stephen and I solved a mystery on a student name not all that long ago, because as we know, our students' official legal names and the names they go by are often not anything like each other. So if there's a mystery to solve, we want to get to the bottom of it and make sure that everything's getting recorded correctly for our students and for ourselves. So, all right. Next week, Debbie, is it Zoom on Tuesday? Am I remembering that right?
I think that's right. I think it's Zoom on Tuesday and Burlington English for Students on Wednesday.
Very good. All right. Well, I will let you all get on with your Wednesday. Thank you so much for your attendance and your participation and your questions. I very much appreciate it. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Yeah, thanks, Becky.
Bye.